on first down. They hand off to Marlon Mack. Huge hole, 50-yard line. He's at the 40, still going near sideline. He's at the 10. He's at the 5, and he will score. Touchdown, Marlon Mack. Touchdown, INDY. And again, it's picked off. It's Darius Leonard. Leonard with a second INT, and he's streaking down the near sideline. He's at the 40. He's at the 30. He's at the 20. He's going to go. A pick six for the Maniac. Kenny Moore gets to Deshaun Watson. That's a sack for Kenny Moore. Kenny has a pick and now a sack in the game.
Horseshoe is back, baby. The horseshoe is back.
Welcome back to another edition of the Bring the Juice podcast. I am your co-host, as always, Cody Felger. Joining me, your other co-host, Derek Larger. Derek, the draft is quickly approaching. Man, on a scale from 1 to, let's see, RCA Dome loud, how excited are you right now, man, for this draft?
I'm beyond RCA Dome loud, man. I'm ready to go. I'm loving this. I'm ready to go, man. I can't wait. It's nice that the NFL is continuing with it. It's something that sports fans desperately need right now. So I'm ready, man. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it. You're right. And for all those of you who have been following the NFL draft scheduled the last weekend of April. And so we wanted to do something a little bit different for you guys, for our listeners, to say thank you for all your support and all your love. And we wanted to devote this entire week. So the NFL draft starts on a Thursday. And so this coming Thursday, when this podcast drops, it'll be either on a Thursday or Friday, we will be devoting all of our content strictly to NFL draft stuff and stuff that's relevant to the Colts. Wanted to start out the week strong by me giving my mock draft for the Indianapolis Colts 2.0. Derek already released his 2, so if you haven't checked those out, I'd recommend checking out his updated 2.0 draft with all the moves that the Colts have made in free agency and how that impacts his draft. I already posted my 1.0, also with some of the moves already in there, but I wanted to post my 2.0 mock draft for you guys and kind of give my reasoning behind why I believe these players, if they become available, will be great fits with the Colts. So starting off here, number 34 in the second round, I have the Colts taking, and this one's going to be maybe a little bit surprising for people because maybe some people won't think he's going to be there. I have wide receiver Justin Jefferson from LSU. He's 6'3", 192. He's phenomenal. He's absolutely phenomenal. Some people will argue, Cody, you're crazy. He's not going to fall to the second round. But here's why I'm going to disagree with that statement and tell you why here. So this receivers class is notably, everybody that I've heard has said this receivers class is incredibly deep, right? And you look at past drafts, when there's a specific position that's really, really deep, a lot of times it seems like teams will know, teams know this, so they will decide, well, we're going to take these other high-end prospects from the other positions that aren't as deep because we feel like we can get another guy, a better value pick, if you will, in the later rounds. And so I believe that's going to be the case here with the wide receiver group, one of the best groups, probably one of the best wide receiver groups from what I've heard in a long, long time. And so I believe that this could mean, you got Henry Ruggs, Jerry Jeudy, some of those guys that are probably obviously going to go in the first round. And then you got Justin Jefferson, and he's a guy that I think you could get at 34. I really do. I think he's a guy that's going to fall. And I think, man, he's seen it before and in the past history of the draft. And for Jefferson, I mean, he's a guy that, we talk about on this podcast all the time. We feel like especially with the addition of Phillip Rivers, the Colts need a big body possession wide receiver. I don't know the last time they've actually had a dominant, big body wide receiver. It's been a long time. They haven't had it in the Andrew Luck era. They didn't have it in the Peyton Manning era. And I don't know. It was before I was born. And so, and they're also still looking for a complement for T.Y. Hilton. They've never really been able to find a legit number 2 receiver behind him. And he's talking about, 6'3", 192. He's a big body type of guy. And we know the track record with Phillip Rivers. He likes those big body type of guys. I think 6'3", 192 is just perfect for what Phillip Rivers is looking for. And you look at kind of who he is as a player. Last year, LSU had an electric offense. And Justin Jefferson was Joe Burrow's number one option in 2019. He led the country with 111 catches. He had 18 touchdowns and over 1,500 yards. And some of the positives for this guy, I mean, you talk about body control, how important that is for wide receivers. This guy has tremendous body control. He's got great hands, which we know the Colts have struggled in recent years with drops. And he also does a phenomenal job of playing the ball in the air. Like when the ball's in the air, he does a phenomenal job of positioning his body in a way, and his ball skills just going up and getting balls are just fantastic. They're off the charts.
Yeah.
And in my mind, he really has zero red flags in my book. The only thing that I would say he maybe needs to work on is continue to develop his route technique. I think he's a good route runner, but sometimes getting out of his routes, some of the technique there, very teachable thing. But I think that's something that maybe a little bit of a knock on him. But overall, Derek, I think, if this happens, if he somehow falls here to 34, man, I think it's a slam dunk for both sides. I think, first off, new Colts wide receiver coach Mike Groh, he's certainly going to be a guy who knows how to maximize Jefferson's strengths. And he's a great number two option right away to plug in there behind T.Y. Hilton and beside T.Y. Hilton. A great compliment in size and what he brings to the table. And just looking at just some of the stuff that the Colts have struggled with from their wide receivers and getting separation, big playmaking after the catch. I mean, Justin Jefferson checks all those boxes. He's the type of guy that Frank Reich, Nick Sirianni, and Mike Groh would be crazy about if he was in their offense. They would be gushing about him. You hear them gushing about different players. I mean, this is just a different type of player. And I know there's some questions about, well, was he just the benefactor of Joe Burrow in this LSU offense? But, I mean, the guy put up production at the highest level. I mean, he was consistently super good for LSU, consistently one of the best wide receivers in the country. And so he is definitely a guy that I would love, if available there at 34. If I was the Colts and he's there, I'd take him, no question.
Yeah, well, I'm unfortunately going to be one of those people, Cody, that just say, what are you doing? Mainly for the reasons that you just mentioned, all those reasons that Justin Jefferson will not be available by 34. I don't think I've moved him out of my mock drafts from 21, and I've stuck clear to that. I've not moved him back or forward since. I have no reason to think he will come out of the first round, but then again, we'll play along as if like you mentioned, with, anything's a possibility. Justin Jefferson certainly does fit everything you want. A great, reliable receiver, had over 100 catches last season. Obviously, when he played against Oklahoma, had 10 catches for 176 yards and 4 touchdowns. I mean, the kid is absolutely incredible. He plays a little bit like Julio Jones in the sense of when you go up with the ball and he comes down with it, he's going to rip it away from you. He's just that good with his body control, and his hands are incredible. I mean, nothing can be said about this kid that's not already been said. I mean, he's incredible. Makes sense why any team at that point would want to get him. Like I said, I don't think he's getting out of the first round, but if indeed he is, and there's any receiver on the board, then yes, absolutely, we want to get Justin Jefferson, no question.
Mm-hmm. And we could agree to disagree if he falls out of the first round. I mean, I've just seen crazier things, and especially, you think a couple of years ago in 2017, I didn't think Malik Hooker was going to fall to the Colts. I had no intentions of Malik Hooker being there when the Colts drafted. But, things happen. Teams make decisions, and sometimes players fall. And I think, just going back to my point, Derek, about just how historically deep this draft class is. And again, I get it, 20s. So for me, it's not the biggest thing in the world, because it's not like the Colts have a mid-second round pick that they're going to try to take this guy with. I mean, 34 is basically a first round pick. It's just two picks out of the first round there. So I think it's a potential thing to happen, but he's a phenomenal player. So if it doesn't happen, I totally get it, because he's just that good of a player. But just one of my guys, how loaded this wide receiver class is. But okay, well, we can move on to the next one here. 44. I'm kind of changing it up in my mock draft. I'm not going to go with the same guys that I feel like a lot of us are gonna kind of look at. But I have the Colts actually taking an offensive tackle here, just because we know how much Chris Ballard loves that offensive line. Like, he absolutely loves that offensive line and defensive line. It's crazy just how much he loves those positions. It seems like, even when you go on to Madden and you're building a franchise, you don't really look at offensive line like Chris Ballard does, and he just values that so much. But I have them taking Josh Jones, offensive tackle out of Houston. He's got the ideal physical traits. He's got good height. He's 6'5", good weight, 311, and good arm length. I think he's a guy, Derek, that he has a very high ceiling, and he's a guy that I think will need some time. He shows a lot of really good things to be a solid starter for an NFL team. But I think it's something where he needs to sit behind somebody for a year or two and, polish and continue to develop his game. I think he's pretty raw still, just kind of in pass protection and footwork. But, and it's something where I was kind of looking at what some of the experts were kind of saying about him. And they talked about, ideally, in a perfect world, it would be great if Jones could kind of be weaned into a starting role in the NFL, which I think fits perfectly with what the Colts' current offensive tackle situation is. With you re-sign Anthony Costanzo for 2 years, so you think he's going to be here for 2 more years at least. But what happens after that? And I think this is a perfect opportunity to get your offensive tackle of the future. I know we like Matt Peart a lot, but Josh Jones, just looking at him a little bit more, I was like, I really like this guy a lot. I think he fits a lot of the Ballard molds for what he looked for an offensive lineman. And he's just another guy to continue to build that depth on the offensive line. What do you think about my 44th pick here, Derek?
Yeah, Josh Jones is a phenomenal left tackle. Again, it's another guy who some say, if the left tackle market is as big as some people are claiming that it is, some have Josh Jones as the 4th best left tackle in this draft, which is quite incredible when you're looking at the likes of Jedrick Wills, Tristan Wirfs, Andrew Thomas, Mekhi Becton. And Josh Jones is certainly up there with some of those guys. And like I said, if it all depends on the left tackle market, most assume he's a 2nd rounder. Some say he's a 1st rounder. It just depends on how it falls there. But like you mentioned, Josh Jones has phenomenal physical traits, and is kind of a raw guy right now, but you learn behind that offensive line of the Colts, and you get good coaching from them. Josh Jones can definitely be a starter in this league here very soon. So yeah, if Josh Jones is there at 44, I'm not going to be opposed to getting him. No question.
Yeah. And I thought it was interesting. I kind of looked at NFL analyst Lance Zierlein. He kind of talked about him. He said early tape would suggest that Jones is a raw developmental project and need a substantial technique work, but tape study later in the season suggests a level of improvement that creates an additional intrigue for the long athletic tackle prospect. He says, to be clear, he needs plenty of work with his pass sets and footwork, but most of his issues appear to be coachable. He has the traits and talent to be a future starter if he continues to develop with coaching. And we know how big of a thing it is to be teachable, especially in the NFL, especially as a rookie. He seems like a guy who has shown that he can improve with coaching and with being, just continue to develop his craft. I think it's a perfect situation for both sides as the Colts, ideally find their left tackle of the future after Costanzo retires. And he's also not thrown right in there into the fire as a rookie left tackle, barring injury. He's a guy that you could feel real confident about moving forward as he continues to develop his game. But okay, so moving on here now, those are my 2 2nd-round picks. I'll move on now to 75. And this one might be a little more controversial for you, Derek. I know a lot of people had mocked these different tight ends to the Colts, but I'm going to here because I feel like we've done a lot. How about Hunter Bryant? Tight end out of Washington. He's 6'2", 240 pounds. So he's not the typical – he's a little bit undersized for a tight end. You look at Jack Doyle, he's 6'6", almost 270 pounds. But he's a guy that scouts kind of talk about almost as like a bigger slot receiver. And he doesn't have, like I mentioned, the ideal size as a blocker, But one thing that he has is he has very sticky hands, right? And he has a guy that can, really take the top off of a defense from the tight end position. He's a guy that really has a lot of playmaking ability, but he needs to continue to develop his routes and stuff like that. But he's a dependable pass catcher. He has a very high ceiling, but the floor could also be. And one of the concerns with this guy is that he's had some knee injury issues in the past. And so he, depending on the medicals and all that stuff, the Colts will have to make that determination. But if he's healthy and if that all checks, I think he's a guy that does really well with what the Colts want to do on offense. He's a guy that brings another wrinkle to this offensive scheme. Like I mentioned, he's a little bit undersized, but he's just a guy, man, that I think can really work well into this Frank Reich system. We mentioned the tight end position. We feel like the Colts need to fill the role of Eric Ebron with a pass-catching tight end, and he certainly fits the bill there. Derek, what do you think about Hunter Bryant?
Yeah, like you mentioned, he is definitely undersized at 6'2", 239 pounds. But, I mean, that's not always the worst thing when it comes to a tight end. They might use him in more gun packages, but you look at his stats, played 12 games in 2019, had 52 catches for 825 yards and 3 touchdowns, which certainly isn't bad for a tight end, no question. And 52 catches is pretty phenomenal. Yeah, Hunter Bryant is definitely an interesting one. Guy from Washington. That'd be really funny to see him get drafted and then and Jacob Eason get drafted early if that were to be a thing. That would be funny. But yeah, I mean, you look at the tight ends that would be available. Cole Kmet will most likely be gone. If you don't have faith in Bryson Hopkins early in the draft or think he might fall at some point, then it never hurts to go after a guy like Hunter Bryant, who definitely you can use in a multitude of ways. I don't know how he is in run blocking. I mean, with him being undersized, I can't imagine it being really good for him. But, but like you said, with a guy that is a little bit smaller for a tight end, you can use Hunter Bryant in a multitude of ways in that offensive scheme for the future. So you never know. That could be an interesting one for sure.
And the beauty of Frank Reich's system is I don't think, if they do draft Hunter Bryant, they're going to ask to do that. They didn't do that with Eric Ebron really until they were forced to when Jack Doyle went down in 2018. So I don't think that they will make him run block. I think they'll bring him in certain situations where they can utilize his strengths, similar to how we've seen with different prospects that they've brought in. They especially on offense, the Colts do things where they don't ask players to do things they're not good at. They maximize what the players are good at and try to not have them do those things. And so I think it'd be the same thing with Hunter Bryant. He's not a great run blocker, and so why not just bring in your 2 tight ends who are some of the best run blockers in the league? So there's my pick there in the 3rd round. So now pick 122. Derek, this is a guy that you kind of hyped up for me. I had to kind of do some more research into him. I really like him a lot. And that's Tyler Johnson out of Minnesota. He's 6'2", 205 pounds. And the first thing that stands out right away to me was his ability to make those contested catches. And I am impressed by this guy. He's got the size. He's got good size. His knocks he doesn't have the greatest burst or speed. But he's also pretty versatile, which I think is important. He can play the slot. He can play outside. He can do a lot of things for you. And, just giving Phillip Rivers another pretty decent-sized body type, which I think I like that. And I think he projects pretty well into what presumably will be a very vertical offense for the Colts in 2020 and maybe 2021, depending on the quarterback situation. And I really like him as a fit with this offense. What are your thoughts here back on Tyler Johnson?
Finally, now you're speaking my language here, Cody. Tyler Johnson, I can agree with you because this is the exact same pick I had in my mock draft 2.0. I really like this one. Tyler Johnson, you nailed it on the head. 6'2", 205 pounds, is a contested catch warrior, man. This guy is phenomenal at going up and getting contested catches. And like you said, his knocks are, he doesn't have a great burst of speed off the line. You can always fix that though. You can always fix his technique and stuff off the line of scrimmage. That's something that you can teach. You can't teach the willingness to go up and get a ball and just be that guy to come down with it. I mean, that's just something you're born with, that you have a knack for. And that's why it makes up for him the lack of speed is his ability to do that. And like you said, Phillip Rivers definitely likes the guys that he can go and throw the ball up to and just let them go and get the ball. I mean, that's what Tyler Johnson does. And Tyler Johnson, most of the time, errs on the side of caution when catching the ball and always make sure he secures the ball first before he starts running. So it's really nice to see Tyler Johnson getting his recognition from both of us. I hope Colts fans feel the same, because if we could get Tyler Johnson in the 4th round, I would be ecstatic for Phillip Rivers, because that's exactly the kind of guy he needs.
Yeah, definitely. Here's another pick that I think will be interesting. I don't know if you're going to agree with me on this one, but that's all right. We can do this. This is the guy the Colts have been rumored that they have talked with. Pick 160, I have them taking James Morgan, quarterback out of Florida International. He's got the size for an NFL quarterback. He's 6'4", 213. Maybe just needs to add a little bit of muscle on there, but he's got pretty decent size. And I looked at his stats, Derek, and I was not impressed at all initially. I mean, he was under 60% passer in 2019. He had a better 2018 season than 2019, which is interesting enough, similar to Jordan Love, who I know people have mocked to the Colts at 13 and maybe even now to 34. And also Phillip Rivers. Like they've all had better seasons the year prior. One to some people, but I mean, I look at these later rounds, and you look at some of the later round picks that the Colts have made, and just in general, when you're in the later rounds, 5th to 7th rounds, you're looking less on stats. I think more on the physical tools that you think you can develop. And so you think more recently, small school guy, EJ Speed, for example. I mean, he's a freak in terms of how big he is. Marvell Tell, another guy that the Colts drafted last year in the 5th round. Deion Kane, even Reese Fountain. I mean, these guys had some tools to be NFL players. Not all of them work out, obviously. But, you get more on if you think they have the typical size for – just the NFL level, and see if you can develop something and see something in them. So this is the same, within that same vein, I think he's got a lot of those things that if he's properly groomed, there's some traits that could possibly translate to the NFL level. I mean, he's got size, like I mentioned. He's got a good arm. He's got good accuracy, which is a big thing for Frank Reich. He's got good anticipation on his throws, and he's also a tough guy. So I think he checks a lot of the boxes that the Colts are looking for in that aspect. There are a lot of negative traits, though, a lot of negative things that you can point to. I talked about his stats. But it seems like a lot of those things that you look at, they're kind of coachable things, right? Like, for example, one of the knocks on him is that he doesn't know when to throw the ball away. He takes unnecessary sacks, which when I read that, I was like, interesting. That kind of reminds me of a former Colts quarterback who people were dogging because it seemed like he was taking unnecessary hits. He kind of reminds you of Andrew Luck a little bit early in his Colts career. He's trying to make a play, holds onto the ball, and he gets sacked. And so he's going to have to learn that. That's going to have to be coached out of him a little bit. And realizing, dude, it's okay to check the ball down. You don't have to make every play. And the good thing is, in the difference between Andrew Luck and his, younger Andrew Luck and this, and if Morgan comes onto the Colts, is that the Colts have a solid core of pieces that will help alleviate the need to feel like I need to make a play or my team's going to lose. Like, I feel like they have some pieces on defense. They obviously have one of the better offensive lines. They have a solid running game. I think it was the number 7th running game. And if they add some of these wide receivers that we're thinking and a tight end, like, they have some weapons and some pieces now where you don't have to make a play, turn the ball over. And it can be okay if you don't make every single play because you have guys who can help pick up the slack. So I like this guy a lot simply from how he projects. He's a guy that has tremendous upside. I mean, he's got, some of the intangibles that I think make you go, wow, if this guy can put it all together, he could be a solid steal for the Colts here. So I got Morgan here at 160. What are your thoughts here on James Morgan?
Yeah, like you said, with James Morgan, he's got the size, he's got the intangibles for sure. When you're drafting a quarterback this late in the draft, you're thinking more of the lines of how can you use their intangibles and make it work for you and your system later on down the line. Um, it's definitely interesting. I've heard people say that James Morgan's uh, one of the smarter guys in the NFL draft this year that they've enjoyed talking to. So it's definitely nice to hear good things when it's talking about your intelligence. I think people sometimes forget how important that is,
Oh,
but
yeah.
yeah, I mean, I am totally not of the mindset of getting a quarterback this late. But then again, it's why Chris Ballard and those guys get paid right now to do that, and I don't at the moment. Who knows what they may plan on doing, but if they think that a 5th round quarterback in James Morgan and they think that they can pick his mind and make him better as a passer, then I'll be on board with it.
Yeah. And I come from this from a couple different standpoints, Derek. Obviously, the first one, I think the Colts are in win now mode. So I don't think a quarterback is necessarily in play in terms of early rounds. I'm kind of more so mid to late rounds, which is why I had them taking a quarterback 4th or 5th round. I ended up going 5th round with Morgan just because I feel like Tyler Johnson's there. You want to get another weapon for Rivers. And I think he's a guy, you mentioned it's like, you can't underestimate, smarts in the NFL. And that is something I felt like, the Colts love Jacoby Brissett, but I feel like that's something last year that they even talked about. There were times when Jacoby Brissett couldn't, there was something that they felt like he should have done better, whether that's identifying a linebacker, changing the play, whatever it is. The Colts obviously felt like there was something still lacking, even though they said Jacoby did some good things. There were still some things lacking in terms of controlling the line of scrimmage. It seems like this guy, he's one of those guys that's a big X's and O's guy. He's a guy that can outsmart the defense, and that's really a big thing. And it's not like he's a smart quarterback with no physical tools. He's got the physical tools too. And so I'm excited. I'd be excited if they got James Morgan simply because I feel like he's got a lot of the intangibles. He's got the physical tools. He's got the smarts. Now, if he can get coached up, I feel like he could be a potentially solid quarterback, maybe solid backup or even maybe a starter. Who knows? But I have him there at 160. 193, I have him taking a safety out of Maryland, Antwon Brooks. And I know the Colts have, 2 good safeties in Malik Hooker, Kari Wheeler. They have George Odom, who's played some key roles. He played a key role in that Kansas City victory last year. But I feel like they could just use another safety to kind of throw in the mix there, especially with Clayton Geathers presumably not coming back. We know Roland Milligan was also re-signed to a 1-year deal, but I think just adding more competition to that safety group. And the thing that's good about Brooks is that he's also a guy that is a good tackler and he plays special teams. And I think that would just be a good fit for the Colts. Just see what you got there. He's a guy that, he doesn't stand out in terms of, just some of his, athleticism and stuff like that. But I think he's a guy that, could just be a good, solid depth piece for you, a good special teams player for you. And that's what you're kind of looking for, even in 193 as well. So I have Antwon Brooks there. And then the last guy, 197, Derek Tuska. He's an edge guy. I think the Colts add another edge guy here, especially with Jabal Sheard maybe not coming back. We haven't heard anything on that front. But, just getting more upside and more speed guys, some guys that can potentially just help you on the edge. And so Tuska's a guy, North Dakota State. He's a guy that I think has some upside there. And, if he's still on the board there at 197, I think he's the guy that could develop into a rotational piece potentially or just be, one of a backup type of player. But that's all I got, man, for my mock draft. I guess, do you have any thoughts on the last 2 picks I have here?
Well, I kind of liked the Antwon Brooks pick because what you mentioned you mentioned he was a good tackler. He was actually a linebacker for his first 2 seasons with Maryland, which is kind of crazy to think about. He was an undersized linebacker, obviously being 5'11". But he kind of slimmed down and just kind of went back to a more secondary role, but obviously, like you mentioned, 87 tackles, had 8.5 tackles for loss. He had 1 interception, 5 passes defended, 1 fumble recovery in 2019. So that's an interesting one. I do, and Maryland does produce some pretty decent secondary guys later in drafts. So I can appreciate an Antwon Brooks, and I can appreciate the edge rusher on the last pick as well. You're copying my book straight out of it from last time. I mentioned getting a edge rusher as well with that last pick. Like you mentioned, getting those speed rushers on the outside. Chris Ballard always said, you can never have too many depth pieces on the defensive line, and they're certainly still going to need that. Obviously, we have more depth now with the picks we made, but we still need some depth. So I completely agree with those last two. Overall, I think that I definitely agree with you. You have your shock value with your picks, no question. But
Yes.
like you mentioned, it sounds like a Chris Ballard kind of draft because you never know. Like you have the general consensus of what people think you need. But I mean, of course, if one thing we know about Chris Ballard is that there's a couple of picks in every draft where we scratch our heads the moment we hear the name and we're like, why did we pick that guy? And then you look into it more and then you're like, oh, well, that's why. So that makes total sense that you switched it up a little bit, but you also brought in some names again that a lot of people know. So I like this mock draft.
Well, thanks. Yeah, and it's something where if somebody disagrees with me, that's fine. Like you just obviously disagreed with Jefferson being there, but like it's totally cool. Like I could throw an argument there, but at the end of the day, we have no idea what's going to happen. We have no idea how the board is going to fall. The board could fall this way, it could not. We just don't know. But I just threw in kind of my 2 cents, and like you mentioned, we just got to change it up a little bit. I don't want to go with all the same mock drafts that I've seen 1,000 times.
Mm-hmm.
With Denzel Mims, or if Denzel Mims is there, you take him. But like,
Yeah,
I'm just changing it up a little bit. And so, if you guys don't agree with that, I mean that's fine. It's cool. But yeah, that's just kind of my mock draft that I have here. I feel good about a lot of these picks. I feel like there's a lot of upside with a lot of these guys, and I did this under the mindset that the Colts are building around Philip Rivers based off of some of their moves this offseason. So yeah, that's just kind of where I'm at here with my mock draft.
Mm-hmm.
So, all righty. Well, thanks guys so much for listening. I hope you enjoy this mock draft. I hope you enjoy draft week. We're going to be pumping out a lot of content for you guys. Because we appreciate your support and your love for us leading up to the NFL draft. Colts don't have a first-round pick, but it doesn't mean the action and the draft's not relevant to the Colts because they have a lot of picks 2nd through 7th, and I guess 6th. They don't even have a 7th.
And they could always go back into the first round. Don't forget that.
Could. That's true. They could. So, definitely be sure to check out our stuff. When the draft comes, we're going to have some special guests on to kind of discuss some of the picks that the Colts make here. With their, maybe first round or, some of their 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, all the way down to all their picks. We're going to have some reaction videos to those and kind of our initial thoughts of some of these prospects. So
and don't forget, we're for Twitter, what we're going to do is once this video goes up, we're going to post a poll on Twitter and other places. We're going to ask you guys for your opinion on who had the better mock draft. Cody and I were talking about a punishment for the one person that doesn't do well. I don't know if we're gonna actually go through with anything or not, but we kind of talked about. I teased Cody with the idea of one of us going bald, but I don't know if that's necessarily gonna go over well because our moms would kill us. But either way, we'll see. We'll maybe think about something with that. But yeah, be sure when this video comes out, we're gonna post some stuff. Be sure to let us know who had the better mock draft in your guys' eyes. Don't necessarily look at it from what you think. Necessarily think more of what a Chris Ballard kind of draft would look like, and see who you think actually had a better fit draft. So that's all I got for that.
Yeah, and just to clarify, we're in our 20s and our moms still would kill us. Like it's just like they
yeah,
we didn't know
absolutely.
what good
I
ball.
could be 40. My mom will still kill me if I decide to do that. No way,
I
man.
can't pull it
Holy
off.
cow.
Yeah. I can't pull off being bald. I don't want to even try it. I've never tried it, but I've had my hair in a buzz cut, and I'm like, nope. I have a rather large head, so don't really want to show that off, if you know what I mean. So
yeah.
But
hey,
yeah,
I don't mind showing off the shiny dome. To be completely honest with you, I honestly do need a haircut. So
me too.
but
Oh yeah.
but you know, I don't know. I don't know.
All right. Well, it'll be interesting to see what you guys think. By the way, vote for me. I would love that. Anyway,
oh yeah, over here. Hey guys, vote for me. Okay, you know who your favorite is.
I know I'm gonna get destroyed, but it's fine. Whatever. All righty. Thanks, guys, for listening as always. And as always, go Colts.